So during the course of this webinar, we're going to cover the basic workflow of doing a code review in Upsource, and we are going to cover things like navigating through your code in Upsource, and then we're going to cover some of the new features in Upsource 2.5. So firstly, let's go through a typical workflow. So this is our Upsource. This is our Upsource screen. I'm using a project Morphia. It's an open source project. The version of Upsource that I'm using at the moment is it's even earlier than an early access program. So this is basically a very recent build. So this is kind of not necessarily one of those builds that you might want to throw straight into production without fully testing. So now I've made my caveats, I can go ahead and try and use this. And if anything goes wrong, I'll just say that will be fixed by the time the main product comes out. So we've got Morphia uploaded here in Upsource. I'm logged in as me, and I can see here the branches and the history of commits to this particular project. Here we've got the branches here, and each person's commits. Now this is a commit I did fairly recently on the branch issue 841, and let's say I want to create a code review for this particular commit. So I'm going to click on Create Review. By the way, I'm running the server this is running on is a 4-year-old MacBook Air. So if it's a little bit sluggish, then that's the reason why. So now in my new code review, I can see the files that are in this code review that were in this revision. I can scroll down and see the changes in each of these files. And I can minimize those and skip fairly easily to the change to see. In my code review, obviously I'm going to want to add some reviewers. So I'm going to say, let's add the reviewer, and let's add Justin to review my code. Now, if I go over to another window, in this window, I'm logged in as the reviewer. So here I can see, here I'm logged in as the reviewer. So I'm going to try not to flip too much between these two different users because I don't want to add to the confusion, but I do want to show you two sides of the code review process, both me as a developer and then this reviewer user. So you can see both sides of the code review process. So I've been added to this code review here. So I can see, like I could see on the other page, I can see the files that make up this code review, the changes that make up this code review. And I can make comments on this. For example, I might want to make a comment on here and say something like, you shouldn't pass mappers into bojos. So I can add a comment inline there. Or if I want to, I can also look at a side-by-side diff if this makes me feel more comfortable. So I can see the old file and the new file, and I can see the changes perhaps more clearly in a side-by-side way. And here, once again, obviously I can add comments as well. So I'm going to leave a comment here. And when I close my side, well, I can see here that I have the discussions down here. I can see the number of discussions that are available on this class. I can go through the side-by-side diff and see each of the files in a side-by-side form. I can close that and go back to my original screen if I want to. You can see that Upsource automatically collapses unchanged lines of code, and I might want some more context around this. So if I click on this, I can expand these lines of code incrementally. So I can see more lines of code around the changes. If I flick back to me as the developer user, if I flick back to Tricia, then I can see when I go back to my review, let's go back to the home page. I can see these two new discussions have appeared on my code review. So I can go in and I can have a look at these. Let's expand these things out. So I can decide what to do about these things. So let's say for this comment here, where all I have to do is do a simple move, I can switch back to IntelliJ IDEA, find the file that needs to be changed, and make the required changes. Now, if I have a look, I actually have the Upsource plugin installed on IntelliJ IDEA, so I can actually see the comments from Upsource in my IDE, which is super useful. So I don't have to flick between the web UI and my IDE in order to act upon these different comments on my code review. So let's say I do what the code reviewer stated. Let's check in that change. And I can mark this comment as resolved because I've done what I needed to do for that. So let's go back to Upsource. Let's go back to my reviewer. I logged in as the reviewer. And now when I go back to my home screen, oh no, before I do that, sorry, I always forget some steps. Logged in as me, I can see the new changes I just committed. So that's this one. It was just one file that got changed, just one field. I'm going to attach this change to the existing review. So I want to attach it to this one here. Now, as the reviewer, I can see that this code review 11 has had some changes applied to it. So I'm going to click on this. Here I can see all the revisions which came into this code review. So I can see the original one. At the moment, I've got both selected, so I can see the net of all the changes which went into this code review. But maybe I just want to see the most recent changes, in which case I deselect this revision, keep this revision selected, and then I can see that what happened was this field got moved up here, which is what I asked for, and that this comment has been resolved. So I'm kind of fine with this at the moment. So I think the code review has addressed all of the issues I raised. So I can say, I accept this code review. I can also say, I reject this code review. And these are kind of very strong words, but since code review is an iterative process, I don't think we have to think about it as reject is all your work is useless, don't come back again. Reject just means in this iteration, I have viewed all the changes in your code review, and I have decided that you need to do some actions, whether it's answering some questions or making some changes before I think we should merge this code in. So maybe because I actually have another outstanding comment that hasn't been addressed, maybe I might reject this for the time being. And you can see that my reviewer has rejected this. We're waiting for the other reviewer to do something with this, but for the time being, I've finished my review. If I go back to me, logged in as the developer, then I can see that this code review has been rejected, so I have to make some changes to it. One of the things that you can do is instead of manually selecting each of those commits and attaching it to a review, I could instead have selected this branch and created a branch review. And then every time I add a new commit to this branch, it will automatically get connected to this code review. So if you're doing things like feature branches, this is particularly useful. And one of the other things to quickly mention before we move on from the basic workflow of code reviews is if I've decided, actually, I've changed my mind, I'm not rejecting the review, I can resume the review. So I can change my mind between accept and reject. This is not like a final, definitely you can't do anything anymore with this code. So I can reopen, reject, accept, and so forth. Okay, so that's kind of the simplest, most typical workflow of a code review where a developer is going to check in a revision or a branch with a set of revisions, create a code review for that, assign some reviewers, and then the reviewers will make a series of comments, start a number of discussions on that code, and the developer will make those changes, apply those changes to the code review until all the reviewers are happy and it gets signed off. All of these features are available for any language that you might want to use Upsource to review. But let's look a little bit at the Java support specifically. Upsource has some additional features to navigate through Java code, for example. So if we go back to our main home, so let's go back to one of these classes. Let's look at the aggregation pipeline. These, as you can see, these are Java classes. I can select something like the mapper field, and it offers me the option to go to the declaration of this field. So I might not know from the snippet what mapper is, I might not know what this method is, I don't have a lot of context. But by clicking on this, it'll take me to the context for this. So here I can see the whole of the class, the aggregation pipeline impl. I could do something like, if I click on this field, I can highlight the usages in the file. So here I can see mapper is highlighted. This is useful as a code reviewer because I can decide whether perhaps this field really lives as a field level, if perhaps there's some design smells in the class, like some fields get used by half of the methods and the other fields get used by the other half of the methods. That might indicate that this class is doing too much and can be split into two. So I can use these sorts of features to do some analysis on the design of the code. I can do things like I can also find out where these classes were defined, so I can go to the declaration of the mapper, for instance. If I can, oh yes, and I can also find usages. So let's say we're in aggregation pipeline impl. One of the things I might want to do is find out where this is used from. So if I do find usages, again, this is the sort of thing that you're probably familiar with if you're using IntelliJ IDEA. These kinds of functions you probably use quite a lot to figure out what the code is doing and how it works. Here I can see that aggregation pipeline impl is used within its own class when it's declaring the logger, but it's also called from within data store impl. So I can click on this and it will load up the call here. So here I can see where this particular class is used. And if I want to drill back down, I can go to the declaration here. One of the other features you get, which again is familiar for IntelliJ IDEA users, is if you look at a method like this, which overrides a method either from a superclass or from an interface, I have a little arrow which tells me as well that it has ancestors. And this allows me to go upwards through the hierarchy. So I could perhaps click on this and it tells me that this method aggregate is defined in aggregation pipeline, which is an interface. So I can go directly to this interface. And I can do the same thing in the other direction. I can see I'm in an interface, then who implements this interface? In this case, it's just one class. But it allows me to navigate through ancestors and children and so forth. And finally, one of the other really useful things that you'll find in IntelliJ IDEA is the inspections that it provides you. So I'm just going to open a class to give us an example. So we have a yellow thing up here which tells us that not all the inspections passed. Let me close this down. I don't need that. Not all the inspections passed. And here I have an inspection warning me that something might be wrong. So in this particular case, it's suggesting that type.getName could potentially throw a null pointer exception, which is really useful to know. Let's have a look at the declaration of type. Where is it? Oh, it's just a variable which is defined up here. So yes, it could potentially be null. So this is kind of telling me this was useful during a code review because I could sort of say, well, perhaps you might want to address this inspection to make sure that the code is absolutely robust. In this case, we found it in a class which isn't part of the classes under code review. So I can still leave a comment on here if I want to. So I'm going to leave a comment. I'm not going to attach it to the code review because this specific code was not introduced in the code review. But I can leave a comment on the class all the same so that future users can have a look at it and they can see that I can basically annotate my code with things that perhaps we should do, things we should do better, comments for perhaps future code reviews. So here I might want to say the next person to come here should fix this. And then that comment is associated with this class. So anyone who comes and reads this class later on can see this is something that we should do. So that's a kind of high-level overview of some of the features that Upsource supports specifically for Java. We navigated through the code, we looked at ancestors and inheritors. We can use inspections to give us much more help when we're doing our code reviews, for example. We can also see, you saw how we were using navigation of Java code to navigate through the whole code base potentially. Upsource is not just a way to do code reviews. Upsource is also provides the ability to navigate through your code base. I found this particularly useful if you're trying to get to grips with a new project, maybe an open source project. You can import it into Upsource, and then you can browse the project similarly to how you might do inside your IDE. So let's take a look at that. If we go back to our home page again, I can go to Browse Code. And this will show me something like my project view that I might be used to seeing in my IDE. I can drill down if I want to, see which classes make up particular projects, so on and so forth. I can search for a specific class. So in the same way in IntelliJ, you can do Command and N to search for a class. Here I can search for symbols, so I can say aggregation, pipeline, impl. I can use camel humped words like I can do in IntelliJ, which prevents me from having to type the whole class name out, which is nice. And so I can navigate directly to this. It's not just classes that I can navigate to, though. I can also navigate to any methods. So I could look for methods called save, for example, and it will show me all methods called save in the project. So I can navigate directly to one of these. I can also see the history of a file. So I can see who made changes to it. I can navigate to one of these revisions if I want to. So maybe I might want to go back to an older revision. This will show me what went into this revision and also which branches that revision is in. And if I want to, I can also browse the code for this revision. So I don't just see the changes that went into that revision. I can basically see the snapshot of the whole code base at this point in time. So again, I can drill down, have a look at the structure, or do a search for the same sorts of classes, and see what they look like at that point in time. That's kind of a summary of the sort of browsing code functionality along with a little bit of the search. One of the other features we can do is we can compare branches, for example, or tags or specific revisions. So I might want to compare a tag. Let's have a look at revision 1.0.1. Let's see what that looks like compared to master. I can see that 30 commits have gone in since revision 1.0.1, and I've changed 500 odd files. I might also want to compare that to the previous revision. If I type it right, that's all. So then I can see which commits went into this revision. Basically, what's the difference between release 1.0.1 and 1.0.0? Finally, when we're talking about exploring code bases, one of the really powerful features of Upsource is its ability to search, its kind of smart searching ability. So at the very basic level, I can do something like look for just my commits, so the author is me. Here I can see which branches I made commits to, so on and so forth, when they happened. I can look for another author. So let's say I'm trying to decide whether to approve a pull request or not. I might want to look to see if that author has submitted pull requests in the past. What was the quality of their code? How many have they done? So I might want to search for a specific author to see what their code looks like. In this case, let's see if we can find any authors from the 10gen organization, because they're the maintainers of this project. So I can select, it gives me autocomplete, so I can select one of these authors to find out what commits they made and when they made them. I can do a lot more with the search. I can do things like, I can look for any of these things for a start, but I can look to see perhaps for keywords in the commit comments. So maybe I want to see anything where we committed something to do with geolocation queries. So let's search for geo and see which commits came up with geo. So here we can see all the features that went in that at least geo appeared somewhere in the commit comments. You can do some smart searching around dates. So I can do date, I can search for specific dates if I want to. I can search for things like this week, this month, this year. Maybe I'm coming back to this project after a little while away, so I want to have a look at what commits went in this month. And I can do that using the search. So here I can see September, not an amazingly busy month, which is great because as I dive back into this project, I know I don't have to get to know a whole new swathe of code that went in since I last checked the project. I can combine these searches, of course, and I can do logic. Like I can say everywhere where the author wasn't me and it's on the master branch, I want to see everyone else's commits to see what went on there. And then that gives me this. So I can build up these kind of fairly complex queries using simple logic. So I've got my not and my and I have my smart autocomplete, so it can kind of help me figure out what sorts of search queries I can create. I can also do something like search for the path. So I can look for any commits to a specific module or to a specific part of the code base. Here I can see, for example, that the Juice plugin hasn't really changed since July. So we have very powerful search in Upsource. We have a whole blog post and documentation on this too. So if this is an area that interests you, we can point you to those links later on. So that was an overview of how we can explore our code base. It's not just about creating code reviews. It's not just about checking every new commit. It's about the ability to navigate through your whole code base, see what it kind of looks like, see how it hangs together, have a look for changes which might have happened since you've been away from the code base, and do some interesting analysis and searching on the code base. The last section, we're going to go through kind of potentially the most interesting bit, especially if you already knew all that stuff about Upsource. We're going to go through the new features which are available in Upsource 2.5. There may be some features that I can't demo immediately because 2.5 hasn't been released yet, but I can give you a sneak peek of the features that are available in this build. We will have an EAP available tomorrow, I believe, so you'll be able to download it and play with this this week. So let's take a look at some of these new features. Firstly, we have a new branches page. And this will show me all the branches in the project. I can do things like I can select one of these branches, see the changes in this branch, create a branch review, that sort of thing, the sorts of things you expect to be able to do with branches. I can do things like change the default branch. So if, for example, maybe this project has a 2.x branch, which is the current branch, but it's not master because it hasn't been merged back yet. I might want to change my default branch to this branch that I'm working on by default. Obviously, I can search through my branches. In my particular case, I don't have that many, so it's not that useful. But obviously, in most projects, you have lots and lots of branches. This allows me to search through those branches. Let's go back to the main project and look at the other area. Let's look at the code review again. Code review 11. If I scroll to the bottom of this, I can see all of the timeline, the whole timeline of this project. So when changes were made, of this code review, sorry, when changes were made, when reviewers were invited, when reviewers accepted or rejected things. I can now, if I want, I can show only the unresolved issues or unresolved discussions in this timeline. So here, when I saw all of this thing, and I'm like, I'm not really sure the status of this code review. But when I say only unresolved, then there's an issue here that I need to either reply to or address or something like that. So it's much easier to see what state my code review is in. I can do things like I can add a label to my comments now. So this particular label, I can say something like, this is a bug, this is an issue with code style, this is a requested enhancement, or help wanted. So you can basically assign these, you can decide in your team how to assign these to particular things. I think this is very, very useful. When I've been working on code reviews before, what you see is a lot of comments on the classes, and you're not really sure whether that's a comment which is a showstopper, which I need to do something about before the code review will get passed, or whether it's just a comment which warrants some further investigation, or perhaps it's a question that the reviewer wants more information on. This way, with these labels, I can more easily clarify whether this is a showstopper, so the code review isn't going to go forward until the developer addresses it, or whether it's just something which I really would like to discuss a bit further. I can add new labels as well if I want to. So let's say I think this is a matter of design. So let's talk about design, give it a color, and create that label. Oh no, this has failed to add label to the discussion. Okay. I did mention this is a very early access build, right? Let's try again. Okay. So I did see new labels working earlier on today, I promise. Maybe if I give it a brand new name, maybe it will work better. I tried design earlier on. Let's call it design smell. Let's make it brown and murky. Oh well, that feature's not working in my particular build, but I've definitely seen this working earlier on, and in the early access build, which will be available tomorrow, I'm sure you'll be able to play with this. So anyway, we've assigned code style to this particular discussion, which means that one of the things I could do is, if I went back to the home page, I can search for discussions with particular labels. So I can say label, let's look for any discussion with code style. And here I can see the discussions with code style. So I can do triage over how many outstanding bugs maybe are open, or if we have lots of questions that are open, maybe I can use this to figure out what sorts of discussions are stalling code reviews, or how many of different types of discussions we have in our open code reviews at the moment. And if we go back to this here, one of the other nice new features is, maybe as the developer, I'm now looking at this here and I'm thinking I should probably do something about this, either reply to it or resolve the issue. But I'd like to get to look at this code inside my IDE before I can make any decisions. I can now, in 2.5, open this inside my IDE. So here, it's opened this code review, Morphia code review 11. I can see the two commits which make up the code review. This is in the Upsource plugin in IntelliJ IDEA. And I can see, if I look here, I can see the discussions which are open. So let's look at the source here. And I can open the discussion here. So if I want to, I can reply to it inside my IDE, or I can make some changes to the code. So let's say I want to make some changes to the code. Let's try and do something simple. I don't want too much time doing code. Let's say we change it into the point converter instead. So let's move this up as a parameter and remove the mapper. Let's go back here, extract this here. Set that there. Now I've made that change where I'm passing the point converter into the object instead of the mapper. Let's commit that change. And I'm going to tag this with I'm going to put in the commit message the ID of the code review that I'm addressing. So I'm actually going to do, it was code review 11. So I'm applying these changes. I'll commit that. And I will also respond to this question, this discussion here. Now, when I go back to the Upsource web UI, let's look back at the home page. This is my new commit. I can see it automatically got added to code review 11. I didn't have to assign this to the code review this time. And even in the commit message, I can actually click on this ID and it will take me to that revision. It will take me to that code review. And now I can see my new revision on there, including my changes. And I can see that my comment has also been added to the discussion. The final change that I want to demonstrate for Upsource 2.5 is around the improvements around the email notifications. So if I can show you an example of one of my email notifications, I'm going to try and show you one of these without actually showing you all my email. And bring it out over here. So my email notifications, I can see in my email notification, I can actually see the code that has changed and the changes to the description, the changes to the discussion. So where I added an additional discussion point, the reviewer gets emailed this as well. Now, let's say the reviewer is, I don't know, off on a plane somewhere. Oh, that's not a good example. Off to lunch and just wants to be able to answer this specific point. They don't need to launch Upsource or their IDE to answer this specific point. They can just add the comment by email. And then they can use their email client, even on their phone, to respond to questions or to give more information. So you don't necessarily have to be in the full UI in order to interact with Upsource, which makes it much quicker to get feedback for things like answering questions or giving more information about a point that you had. One of the other things around emails is, let's see if we can add the comment by email first. Let's have a look. It's opened on my other window as well. So when I say I want to add comment by email, then it gives me that option there. I can put in my comment here. I can use Markdown if I want to. So it's a fairly simple UI just to let me answer questions or provide more information. And now there's also more granular controls over the email notifications that I get. So if I click on my own settings, I can see I have all these different email notifications and I can decide which ones I actually want to have enabled. So it gives me much better control and I'm not just going to dump all emails into the bin or have to check everything that I don't necessarily care that much about. So I think we've covered all the main new features that are available for checking in Upsource 2.5 right now. So you can easily get us, either you can get me on Twitter or you can email additional questions to robertdemer@jetbrains.com and you can follow up for more information. You can ask the Upsource Twitter handle as well if you want. So there's plenty of ways to drop us a line if you've got more questions. We're very happy to answer those questions. And as Maria says as well, if you have feature requests, enhancements, or bug fixes, then do look for the issue tracker and raise enhancement requests there. As Maria says, it's very driven by what the community demands. As always, you can see more screencasts and webinars on our YouTube channel, and this session has been recorded and will be available in the next few days. Have you got anything else, Maria?
No, thank you, Tricia.
No, thank you. You've been doing a great job curating all the questions. Thanks very much, everyone. It's been a pleasure.